Yep, Baylor's going to upset SMU this week because of this.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. And it's Friday, so I got to tell you why I think Baylor's going to win or lose this game. And I'll start by telling you, I think this Baylor offense is going to go off. But then we're going to talk about a lot of unknowns with this SMU team and how the week ones were just so much different. But I don't think SMU is going to be able to handle this player in particular. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But we start where we start. Baylor's going to win the football game. Baylor's going to upset SMU. And yes, it is an upset. They're still 3-point dogs. I think 2.5-point dogs maybe. That line has moved just a little bit. Underdogs for the second week in a row to start the season on what was supposed to be a very promising year for this Baylor team. And we know the story of what happened last Friday. We'll reference it a little bit, but we've closed the book. It was not a good defensive performance, but with each rewatch of when Baylor had the football, this offense really is in a good spot. They really are. And, we talked about it with Sydney on Wednesday. I do think they abandoned the run a bit too early. I think they lost some of their dynamism in the run game pretty early on in that game. And things get very misconstrued when you're down 11 points, in the second quarter, and you're just throwing it on every down. It gets misconstrued from the Auburn defensive side of things. It gets misconstrued from Sawyer Robertson's stat line. You have to take that context into account. But I never saw at any point in that game the offense really looking bad. There's a moment in the second quarter where I'm like, oh, this needs to be a little bit better. Come on. But they worked with tempo. They took shots down the field. Everything except abandoning the run game too early, I thought Baylor did really well with. And I see an SMU team that has a really green middle of the defense, right? They got two interior defensive linemen who are transfers playing their second game for SMU, and their best linebacker's probably not going to play in this one, and Alex Kilgore. I think this is the kind of game that Baylor establishes the run again. I don't think there's another week where they run for 60 yards, even if they are losing for most of the game. I don't see that happening. This is not the SMU run defense from a year ago. That was honestly one of the best in America. I think they give up right at 100 yards a game. I think this Baylor offense is good enough to overcome that. It's funny. We heard all this stuff last week about, from the Auburn side, that Baylor hasn't played a defense like this. And really, SMU hasn't played an offense like this, certainly this year, and they played really only one offense like this last year, and that was Clemson, and they lost. It was close. It was a walk-off field goal, but they gave up 34 points, and they lost. Clemson was 18th in total offense in the country last year. Baylor was 19th. And you also have to take into account what Baylor's offense was the first half of the season. That might have been really like a 12th ranked offense sitting down there at 19. I just don't know if they've seen an offense like this. Truly. Kid Klubnik, heck of a quarterback. Probably better quarterback than Sawyer Robertson. But overall, with the weapons that Baylor can throw at you, 8 different pass catchers last week. Rotating in more than 2 running backs this week, I would imagine. And from what Dave Aranda is saying, sounds like we could see some more of Sawyer Robertson running on his own if he's so healthy. There is just a depth and breadth of options that this Baylor offense has that I don't know that SMU has had to cover. And their coverage grades were not that great last week against East Texas A&M. And one of the big takeaways that I saw in the watching the game, but obviously some of the articles I read after the game was that the cornerbacks weren't all that impressive either against a team that's barely Division I in East Texas A&M. That's a whole different animal when Baylor's coming at you. And again, on any given play, it can be Josh Cameron or Michael Trigg or Cole Wilson or Kobe Prentice or Ashton Hawkins or Caden Knighton out of the backfield. There's so many different guys that SMU has to account for that I think if Baylor can establish the run, which they didn't do last week, and they still scored 24, and it should have been 31, against a good defense, a top 20 defense from last year. If Baylor can run for, let's say, 140 yards, they're going to score 40. And this has the potential to be a true up and down the field 2016, the last time these two met, like a 2016 style Big 12 shootout. The over-under, I think, is at like 59, and I would take the over. Like, truly, this is going to be a ton of fun. And when it comes down to, I like Kevin Jennings a lot. I'm going to talk about him in a minute in the next segment. I really like Kevin Jennings, but if you're telling me it's coming down to a shootout, which quarterback do you want on your side? I'm picking Sawyer Robertson. I'm picking Baylor's offense in particular in a shootout scenario. And I think that's what you're going to get into. And some more we'll talk about in a second about kind of the positional matchups. I've said it all week, and I'm going to stick by it. Auburn had a top 10 PFF graded offensive line coming into this season. SMU's offensive line is not Auburn's. In fact, PFF-wise, they didn't have a great week against East Texas A&M. Take that for however you want to take it. I know there's some people who have legitimate gripes with PFF and those kind of grading systems, which I totally understand. Auburn's defense was top 20 in America last year. Didn't help them win a lot of games, but they were top 20 in America. And they brought a lot of guys back. SMU had a very good defense as well. They don't bring as many guys back. And now they got injuries on that front. So, again, this is not Auburn's offensive line. This is not Auburn's defense. This is not Auburn's pass rush, which gave Sawyer Robertson some fits. So all that said, Baylor was 1 or 2 plays away in the Auburn game. There's no reason that they shouldn't close that gap this week against a team that, quite frankly, is less talented. That's not saying SMU's bad. It's not at all. I won't say that. I think SMU's a good team. But it's not as daunting at those position groups as Auburn was. And that's where Baylor really fell behind. Let's talk more about Kevin Jennings, this SMU offense, and some of the uncertainties surrounding this Ponies team and how that could rear its ugly head in this matchup. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. For me and the Baylor Bears, it's got to be Cole Wilson. A couple of guys we could choose from, but Cole Wilson is the guy. 8 catches, 134 yards, team leader in both. And when the pressure was on, Sawyer Robertson could find Cole. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching this team this week, you'll know, and you heard from Dave Aranda, this isn't a fluke, okay? Our guy Cole Wilson's going to be on a streak starting Saturday. And just like Cole Wilson delivered for the Bears, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. So let's do it this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11. That's November the 18th. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Okay. They offer more than just safety. It's won more 2025 IAHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. But you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Baylor SMU on the CW following my favorite episode of One Tree Hill. I can't wait to watch it. State championship game, Tree Hill Ravens versus Pontiac Academy. Hopefully Lucas Scott can play the amount of minutes. No, but in all seriousness, I've heard a lot this week, kind of what we talked about a few months ago with Sydney, of it's ridiculous that this game's on the CW. Like, I'm reminded from the movie Hoosiers when the assistant coach says, look, there's two kinds of crazy. There's one guy who gets stark naked, runs out in the snow and howls at the moon. And then there's the guy who does the same thing in my living room. One is whatever, but the other I kind of have to deal with. You want to take your ACC bull S stuff, and do the CW and do these little deals, whatever. Not in my backyard. But now it's kind of our problem. Now we got to watch the CW at 11 a.m. Central Time. Not excited about that. The other thing I've been hearing a lot this week is, Cam, are you worried about Kevin Jennings? Because you just got carved up, like just diced like an onion by Jackson Arnold a week ago, and he didn't need to throw. Kevin Jennings is a better quarterback than Jackson Arnold. Is he as good a runner? Probably not. Jackson's actually probably a better runner. But Dave Aranda said it in his press conference this week, and it makes a lot of sense. Jackson Arnold runs to run. He scrambles to run. Kevin Jennings scrambles to throw, but he's also a pretty good runner too. So that's really tough to play against. And there's not many guys that Baylor's played in the last 14 games that are like that. Not many. Cam Rising, I guess, would have been one. Josh Hoover, not so much so. He's not like living outside the pocket very much. But like Jackson Arnold, runner. Zion Chris, runner. Right? Jalen Daniels, that's probably the closest example. Garrett Nussmeier, pocket passer. Not much of a mobile guy. Okay? And Baylor did pretty well against Jalen Daniels, but I think this SMU team is better than that Kansas team, even though they were on a bit of a heater going into McLean Stadium last year. So I get it. I am worried about Kevin Jennings after you couldn't stop Jackson Arnold. I'm worried about this Baylor defense overall. But when I look at SMU's side of it, they're without their number one receiver. And Romello Brinson is a good receiver, but you're without Jordan Hudson, who was your most explosive returning skill player, arguably, outside of Kevin Jennings from last year. So no Hudson. Yeah, you still got a key on Romello Brinson. I think RJ Maryland's probably the X factor in skill positions for SMU. He's the closest thing they have to Michael Trigg. Tight end who can split out wide. It can do a little bit of both, can play in the slot. He's a weapon. But the thing that really hangs me up about this SMU team is I don't know anything about them. Like, really. I know Kevin Jennings. I know RJ Maryland. I know they had a good defense, a very good defense last year. They've had to replace some guys. They had to replace some dudes at receiver on offense. But these two week one games are not created equal, okay? Not at all. Auburn and East Texas A&M are not the same level of competition. And SMU showed some sloppiness in that game with the penalties and the turnovers. I think they turned the ball over 3 times. They, forced a couple of their own, but there was some uneasiness in Kevin Jennings' game, and that's probably getting used to new receivers more so than him taking a step back. But there all the things we kind of said about Auburn going into last week of they're not a known commodity. You could say the same thing about SMU, just without the SEC talent that Auburn had. I don't want to talk myself into a box here where I'm people misconstrue what I'm saying as, oh, Baylor's going to win by 4 touchdowns, Because I think SMU will still be able to put up points. I don't think I've seen anything in the last week that's going to make me feel better about this Baylor's defense. Just the fact that they're playing a team that's not as talented as the one that they played when they got absolutely gashed. But this is basically a week one game in terms of how we're looking at SMU. I like going through the advanced analytics, and I looked at it this week just to humor myself. There's just no comparison. SMU looks like one of the best offenses in America because they played East Texas A&M, with EPA and all that. Their defense looks great because they played East Texas A&M. Again, does that mean SMU's a bad team? No, it just means that we don't know anything about them. We don't know anything about them. But yeah, Kevin Jennings worries me. He does. I've been on the Kevin Jennings train since he really started cooking last year. I did think SMU was a deserving college football playoff team last year. But this week 2 becomes like a week 1. The same thing I said about Auburn was in fact, I had some Auburn fans in my comments this week about now a team can be different from last year. It's like, yeah, of course they can. We just didn't know what they were. Like we saw them. I've seen Auburn play now against a good team, I think, in Baylor. I have not seen SMU play against a real Power 4 opponent, not even close. So they got a bunch of new guys too. I don't know if they're better. But if we're going off proven commodities, I just like Baylor's offense more than I like SMU's offense. And that is what it's going to come down to, by the way. We'll do a prediction in the next segment, but that is what it's going to come down to. Again, there's nothing that inspires a lot of confidence in me about this Baylor defense. The defensive backs played well, and they weren't called upon a lot, but they played well when they were called upon. But there's nothing from giving up 307 rushing yards a week ago to 7 days later, me saying, oh, well, they'll have that figured out. Nothing. I don't think it'll be 307 yards because I don't think SMU's is good, but there's nothing that says they're not going to miss 22 tackles like they did in week 1. So that's what really sticks in my craw about this game is we just don't know a lot about them. And Baylor did not convince us enough on the defensive side of the ball last week that we should be confident in their abilities against SMU. It'll be an interesting atmosphere and that it will probably be pretty split. Although I know the SMU alums are driving up the prices on those third-party ticket sites so they can afford it. 2 of the most expensive schools in the country squaring off with $100 to get in the door at Ford Stadium. But coming up, I'm going to talk about why I think Baylor's going to win. Specifically, we're going to do a score prediction, and we've got trivia answers and questions for you. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, I got a pretty simple question for you guys. Are you still paying full price for gas? Why? Why are you doing that, man? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, guys, I was skeptical. I thought this is too good to be true, but it's not. It's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, your PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands too. So don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Of course, today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. I mean, what else, man? Come on. It's that time of year. We're here for it. The NFL season is almost here. Started last night. And FanDuel is making sure you're ready to kick off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I like the free bonus dollars. I also like getting my payouts really quickly, and I like that it makes every game more exciting. Whether I'm watching my team, one that you probably don't care too much for, or just keeping an eye on my fantasy lineup. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Back here on Locked On Baylor. Last segment before we head into the great unknown of Ford Stadium and take on these SMU Mustangs in a Week 2 matchup and what feels like a must-win for the Baylor Bears. We talked about that on Wednesday, and boy golly, if they don't win, you'll hear a lot about it over this next week. Like if they lose 45-28 to SMU this week, Dave Aranda is firmly back on the hot seat, like firmly. And I know people will say, well, they haven't reached their goals yet. They haven't played a conference game. I get it. But if they give up something like 38 and 35 or 38 and 40 in back-to-back weeks, is that really going to inspire confidence in you that Dave Aranda is just going to turn that around? Anyway, let's not deal with hypotheticals. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it. I think the real difference in this game, because I think it is going to be a shootout. They could give up 38 points and win. I think that's a realistic opportunity. It is going to be a shootout. And I think where it's going to come down to, if I had to pick a player, it's Michael Trigg. The Mackey Award tight end of the week in Week 1, Michael Trigg. Okay, they're banged up at the linebacker position. They had some suspect defensive back play. Their best defensive backs are their safeties. They're very good. That to me sounds like a match-up nightmare. How many times do we say that? Match-up nightmare with Michael Trigg. Who on that team is going to stop Michael Trigg? That becomes the big-time question. If you want to throw it back at me with RJ Maryland, I get that. That's why it's going to be a shootout. That's why it's not going to be 42-17. Okay? But I think someone like Michael Trigg with his 7 catches for 99 yards was always open when they needed him last week. That is just something SMU has not gone up against. And actually, I mean, they did last year with Penn State, and Penn State blew the doors off them. They had great tight end play, mismatch nightmares, Tyler Warren, and they just blew the doors off of SMU. So I don't think that's going to be any different. I think Baylor's going to score a lot of points, thanks in large part to Michael Trigg, but also because Sawyer Robertson's really good, because Bryson Washington's really good, because Cole Wilson's good, those things. But official score prediction, I am going Baylor Bears to win this game. And I have changed my score. I'm going 38-30. Okay? 38-30 as the final score. Baylor goes to 1-1. All is right in the world. They blow the doors off of Samford. And then we're talking about a big-time matchup against Arizona State in Week 4. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But that's the way I am leaning towards right now. Before we go and I call for your score predictions, we do need to go over trivia. Okay? My last question was, in 2016, the last time these two teams matched up, Baylor honored the 50th anniversary of breaking the Southwest Conference color barrier in football. Who was that athlete, that late great athlete that they honored and who broke the color barrier? I did see some people in the comments say Jerry Levias, the SMU grad who was the first African-American scholarship athlete in the Southwest Conference. But the answer is the great John Westbrook, who broke that color barrier back in 1966. Billy Love, 30-33. Congratulations to you, my friend. You are the one who got that right. First one in the YouTube comment section or tweet at me at Locked On Baylor is the one who will get that shout out for the next episode. So without any further ado, let's go into it this week after another congratulations to Billy Love. My question to you on a Friday, just like we did a couple Fridays ago, is twofold. When was the last time that SMU beat Baylor in football? And who was Baylor's quarterback? Let me know in the comment section below. First one to get it in the comment section or to tweet at us at Locked On Baylor gets a shout out on the next episode. And so with that, I'm going 38-30 for the Baylor Bears. What is your score prediction? Let me know in the comment section below. If you're going to be at the game, let me know in the comment section below. Then be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you think the Baylor Bears are going to move to 1-1. And if you're going to join us for the post-game show. That's it. It's just the post-game show. We're going to be live on YouTube after the final whistle of Baylor-SMU. Win, loss, or tie, good, bad, or otherwise, we will be here. So thank you guys for making it your first listen today and every day. I hope to see you tomorrow afternoon on the post-game edition of your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.